Welcome, this is Utkarsh Ahuja with Kara Swisher, co-host and co-producer of All Things Digital, brought to you by TiEcon Live. Welcome, this is Utkarsh Ahuja. I'm sitting here, I'm delighted to be here with Kara Swisher, the legendary Kara Swisher from All Things Digital. How are you?
Good.
Thank you for joining us, Kara.
No problem.
What are some of your thoughts on the trends that are prevalent today and how they're going to be shaping the future?
Well, we were talking about social networking specifically, which is the big hot trend of the last couple of years. And the title of the panel was, "They like me, they really like me, now what?" kind of thing. And the idea is that social networking has been an important trend, a little bit faddish in a lot of ways. Some of the stuff is somewhat juvenile and silly and teenagery, but how does it actually has this resonance with people, their presence online and how people interact with each other. And it's a really old idea if you think about it. I mean, it's not so much different from what AOL was doing, what Yahoo was doing, and it's just the next iteration of it. So what we were interested in talking about was, what does that mean? How does where does it go next? How does it last and not become a fad, which many internet applications have become? And then how does it make money? Because that's really the most important question. Because if it doesn't make money, it becomes a fad, and that's the end of it. So we were talking about that and where it's all going and who the big players are, and it was an interesting discussion, especially about sort of how social graphs get formed and continue and keep up.
So in your opinion, do you think social networking in general, of course there's a whole issue of monetizing social networking, and I know that this was a question that you raised in your panel. What are your own thoughts on that?
I don't think it's monetizable yet. I think it's a business I think the valuations of these social networks are insane. I mean, Facebook being worth $15 billion with very small revenues is just crazy. It just is. It's typical of Silicon Valley. It's typical of the frothy economy that the internet had in Web 1.0. It's the same thing, except these companies aren't going public, thank the Lord, because that was some old lady in Omaha would be suffering the consequences of that. But I think they have to find really established business models instead of just talking about them. And they like to talk about them a lot, but they don't like to show you the money. And I really want to see the money that they're making. And I don't mean just a little bit of money. I'm talking about sustainable money that's year after year after year. And even though, say, a company like Yahoo right now is in severe distress because of these takeover battles, it makes money. And it makes a lot of money every single quarter. Google, obviously, it mints money in some secret basement room they have there. So you have to think about what's going to make it last to become a serious, massive business as opposed to these little lemonade stands with giant valuations, and that's what I'm interested in.
So where would you foresee some of this going? Are we talking here that the social media space is going to eventually aggregate into two areas, basically the players versus the non-players, and they'll have to morph their business models or so?
I think it's I think one point that one of the people in the panel was making was that, these are the top websites in the world right now, a lot of social networks, and that's really important. Traffic is critically important. But they have to figure out advertising models, which they were saying were very much like old advertising models of television, or it's not that much different. This isn't some secret sauce that they suddenly have figured out. They haven't figured out a thing. Whether they can get that money from television, from radio, from magazines, from old internet companies like Yahoo and Google, and take that share for themselves, and whether they can deliver for the customer, which would be advertisers in this case, the kind of value they want, and at the same time continuing to innovate for consumers to keep them coming. Because no matter how you slice it and how special we act like these companies are all of a sudden, they're nothing more than media companies. They create they aggregate audience, they entertain the audience, and then they sell advertising based on that audience. So that's their business, and they have to keep innovating, and that's hard. That's really hard.
It is. It certainly is.
Absolutely.
So you've had a very illustrious and interesting,
infamous,
exciting career path. And from being starting out as a foreign services student at Georgetown University to best-selling author for AOL.com. And to the Wall Street Journal, and beyond now with All Things Digital and so forth. And what guided each of your decision points throughout your career? And are there any things that stand out in your career?
Well, I would have been an awful foreign service officer. I'm not very diplomatic, so that was an easy choice there. And I think that I got into newspapers when sort of the great height of newspapers, sort of the end of the era of newspapers at the Washington Post, which was an amazing place to work. And luckily, because AOL was located there, I ended up writing 2 books about the company, the rise of AOL and the decline of AOL, which was fine with me. I don't really care which way it goes. But what was interesting is the idea when I began to cover digital issues, I began to see the end of newspapers, or print newspapers at least, and sort of the rise of these things. And I kept sort of poking the owners of these places I worked and said, you know, this thing is going to get, the kids seem to love it, and I like it, and it really, everything is going digital. We really have to change. And so what I've tried to do is continue to change. And the reason Walt and I started the conference, the All Things All Things Digital Conference, and then allthingsd.com, was because we felt like you could have really highly standardized journalism with high ethics, high standards, accuracy. A lot of what's in the blogosphere isn't so accurate. And also have the dynamic elements of the blogosphere, the energy, the quickness, the fastness, and that we could respond to that and compete in it. Because a lot of newspapers, you know, just bemoan this digital change. And instead of bemoaning it, we should join it, because we're good at, you know, giving out information. And I think a lot of newspapers act like it's over and we're sort of ceding ground to people that aren't as good as we are. And we have to really get in there and fight and we're just as funny, we're just as interesting, we're just as fast, and actually we have practices and standards that is necessary for it to become more than just one big gossip, rumor mongering kind of thing. And so if we apply the Wall Street Journal's standards, you know, which is part of Dow Jones, which we're part of, and we give them the immediacy and fun and interest and analysis and relevance of what's going on in the blogosphere in this digital format, whether it be mobile, online, we do widgets, whatever, however people want it, we want to give it to them, as long as it's really good information that they can trust. The Wall Street Journal and its brands, all its many brands, will be forever. I mean, there's no reason. We're a news organization. We're not a newspaper organization. And I think that's what I've always thought of the whole time, is it doesn't matter. You know, if our readers, or whatever you want to call them, our audience wants to see the Wall Street Journal or our products, they want us to print it on salami, they want to eat it, we'll do that. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It really shouldn't matter. And newspaper and newspaper people have to think like that. And that's what we've tried to do, and try to iterate and try to do different things like video and try all sorts of things. And that's one of the things I've tried to do in at least my careers. No, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least you try something.
Right, and that's certainly a great point, because it seems that general population is just thirsty. It's thirsty for news, for information.
Well, and my grandfather used to say, if people are hungry, they'll eat dog food. And we don't want to give them dog food. You know what I mean? There's a lot of dog food out there, and we want to give them really good stuff. And with the consumer is, I covered retail for 7 years. The consumer is always right. It really is true. And so you have to start to respond to what they want, and then maybe possibly serve in some stuff you think is interesting and see how it works out. And it just creates this much better relationship with the reader, because you have to treat the reader with intelligence. You have to act like they're not dumb. You have to act like their needs are important. And I think that's a great lesson for all media, is that we're here because we have audience, and we should respect that audience, and at the same time respect ourselves to give them high quality information and not dreck and rumors and just stuff that isn't any good. Because at this point there's a lot of that, and we have to get in there and fight sort of the good fight that we always have in every iteration we've been in.
Yeah, and that's certainly very insightful for the news media community in general as well.
Great.
And we're here today at the TiE conference, and if you can share with us some of your thoughts on how TiE has been a platform for potential...
it's a networking event. It's a great networking event, and that's what's great about we do the conference that we do, All Things Digital, which is a smaller conference. Obviously, you have 1 million people here running around, but I think it's always great. You know, there's a big focus on digital, but the analog world is very interesting. You know, I like to go to a restaurant or skiing or whatever, and so there's a really important opportunity to combine digital and analog at the same time. And there's nothing like getting together and really interacting with people. There's something better than networking in any job you're in, and I think that's what's really important. I think that's the most important part of it.
If you can share with our viewers a little bit about, as a person, what are the sorts of things that make you tick, that motivate you, that make you want to jump out of bed in the morning?
Well, my children wake me up. That's what I don't want to get out of bed in the morning ever. But you know, I just think I like change, not just for change's sake, but the idea that one of the exciting things about the internet that really struck me when I first saw it was the availability of information anywhere at any time, the freedom of information, the flow of information. I studied communist systems in college, which there's not that many left anymore, so it wasn't a great career path. But the idea that you can, the information can be free everywhere, and it could change society. Information flowing everywhere can make people more powerful. It can give people information. It can give people strength, jobs, everything. So that if we have that kind of system where everybody has access, hopefully, at some point to all sorts of information, it's very hard not to be aware of things globally, and that's what's really important. And also, some of it's really fun. I mean, my kids have a great time on the internet and with digital things, but at the same time, it doesn't also just consume you. That's what's really important, that you have an analog life and a digital life at the same time, and it becomes, they each help each other rather than are negative towards each other.
No, it's certainly very profound, especially
yes, and profound.
Well, thank you very much. It's certainly been a pleasure.
Thanks.
And thank you for being with us. This has been Utkarsh Ahuja with Kara Swisher from TiEcon Live. Thank you.